Welcome to today's live stream, where we explore how scalable predictive maintenance is transforming the pharmaceutical industry, driving efficiency and reducing downtime. Get ready for expert insights and practical solutions that are shaping the future of pharma. Now let's dive in with your host, Niall Sullivan.
Hello and welcome to this very special live event, live from the Siemens office in Southampton. Thank you for joining us today. Today we're talking about predictive maintenance in the pharmaceutical industry. And I'm really pleased to be joined by my colleague, Jonathan Bonner, to help talk about this, because I'm not very knowledgeable, but you certainly are. So thank you for joining us, Jonathan. I guess before we get started, it'd be good for you just to introduce yourself and your role at Siemens.
Yeah, so my name is Jonathan Bonner. I'm the head of solution engineering for Senseye Predictive Maintenance within Siemens. My background is in condition monitoring and reliability. Worked in a range of different industrial sectors, pharmaceutical being one of them. And really for Senseye and Siemens, the solution engineering team is responsible for scoping out opportunities in the sales cycle, knowing that we understand the complexity of an environment, and that when we go into a deployment, that we have all of it considered. So we're heading towards a successful deployment.
So perfect person to talk to today, which is brilliant. And I guess just before we get into the sort of flow of the conversation, so we do have a Q&A function. So please ask questions throughout our discussion today, and we'll leave time at the end to go through them, or as many as we can. And if not, we maybe do some more follow-up episodes afterwards. So, but let's start really broad first, Jonathan. I think that's the theme of today. Start broad and go very narrow. So what we want to define first is predictive maintenance, because we know in the market a lot of companies or vendors or products say they do predictive maintenance, maybe do or don't. But what's our sort of interpretation of it?
Well, predictive maintenance really, first of all, it's a technology, a decision support tool. But predictive maintenance is about understanding assets condition, machines conditions, understanding that within this production run, how is my production line running? And then having very early indication when something is going wrong. So almost like online condition monitoring, however, it evolves and learns and becomes predictive in the sense that it tells you when you need to do maintenance, not that when an asset's going to fail. It's predicting the need for maintenance. And with PDM, which we'll be showing a little bit later on, it's making this accessible to the wider world.
Yeah, and within, I guess, today's context, we're talking about the pharmaceutical industry, of course. So how do those sort of fit together?
Yeah. So production, manufacturing covers a wide range of areas. So you could think of medication, over-the-counter, vaccines, biotech, contact lens manufacturing, all fall under the pharmaceutical industry. And then if you think about the various areas that you have, from R&D to primary and secondary processing through to fill and finish, even the intralogistics side of distributing these globally, there are a lot of processes that are very much like any industrial environment you'll have, machines making and moving various items. So the need for predictive maintenance in these areas is huge. If you think about the primary and secondary processing, you'll have machines in there, a full range of machines that require monitoring, because if they were to go down or have an unplanned event, that is very costly, especially in the terms of losing batches or products that you can't rework. You have to start from the beginning. And then when you go through to something like a fill and finish, having an unplanned stop there is heavily affecting your output, your actual units that you're able to get out the door and sell to your customers. So in these environments, having an early indication that something is degrading with enough information that you can go and investigate and then repair is extremely beneficial.
Yes, what we're saying is it's not just about one specific area. It's actually a horizontal solution that can cover all parts of the process.
Absolutely.
And in terms of the specific types of equipment, we're going to talk about a few examples, but are there specific types of equipment, machines that benefit most from PDM?
I would say that in any industry vertical, you need to look at where the value is. So if we look at pharmaceuticals, there is value throughout almost the entire process. But if we were to start at, let's say, the R&D areas, yes, you have machinery. Yes, it has a cost behind it if it stops, but it's not affecting your production output. So maybe that's not the best case to start with, but you can always explore what the value is there. But when you start to move into the production side of things, looking at those areas, absolutely, because now it's affecting batches. So if we were to look at, let's say, fermenters within the production side of things, these fermenters start at 2 liters, then 20, 200, 2,000, 20,000. And if these were to go down during a batch cycle, that batch is scrapped, and you can't move on to the next part of the process where you increase the amount of product inside. So that it has a huge impact if it were to go down. So monitoring things like fermenters, for example, extremely useful.
And how do you sort of go about selecting, which parts, which assets to start with? I mean, you mentioned value, of course, but what's that in more detail?
So when we do an investigation, we start off at a high level. We look at which areas in an environment have the highest maintenance activity. So this is your planned maintenance, your reactive maintenance. And from there, we can start to narrow down global organizations to a single site, to a single area, even to a single line or set of machines that have the highest maintenance activity. And from there, we can start to assign what the value of an hour. What if this machine were to stop for an hour, what does this mean to you in terms of product made, potential for sales afterwards? And we can put numbers to those. And once we've identified where the value is, we would then look at feasibility. So do you have the infrastructure available so we can get access to existing data? Is it suitable, or are these machines suitable to have additional sensors put on them, and so on? So it's very much a structured approach on how we investigate and drill down a global organization into our focus area, and then a list of activities once we've got our initial deployments in place.
And it's interesting, one thing to pick out there, you mentioned about infrastructure. So obviously predictive maintenance is could be just one small part of a much bigger story. Not obviously being Siemens, the story is much wider. So maybe you could talk a little bit about how the broader sort of Siemens picture plays into this.
Yeah, absolutely. So the business unit that we are in, Senseye is in, has got regional support all over the world. So whether we're investigating companies in India or Argentina, there are people regionally available to go and meet face to face, actually get a good lay of the land and do a very solid investigation of the environment. But within Siemens as well, there is vertical expertise. So we have verticals that can help you with electrification, automation, and digitization. So the full scope of things within each verticals, pharmaceutical being one of them. So whether you need just advice, consultancy, you need to do a complete retrofit of a brownfield environment, you need to create a greenfield environment, or even have maintenance services, Siemens has the expertise to help you in these areas.
And I mean, we've talked about sort of different areas. So we started off quite broad with predictive maintenance. We've talked about different areas of the pharmaceutical production. But if we think about the specific assets, I know we've got some examples that we'd like to sort of talk through today. So maybe you could talk through some examples of where Senseye has sort of seen success.
Yeah, absolutely. I guess 3 examples. The first will be contact lens manufacturing. And in that process, there is a lot of very fast, high precision movements, generally controlled by servo motors. Now, servo motors are extremely hard to monitor in a traditional sense because vibration monitoring doesn't necessarily work on them. But we have found great success monitoring servo motors using the existing data. So this will be current, torque, speed, and temperatures. And what we found is actually the insights that our application is giving highlight product quality problems long before there's any signs of degradation. So in that use case, there is an impact on product quality before any maintenance team would know that the asset is starting to fail. So great success with something like that. Another example could be your fermenters. Again, essentially fermenters are agitators with temperature controlled agitators, really. And they are the perfect machine type, as an example, to monitor with predictive maintenance. Because not only are the components prone to fail, as most assets are, when things do start to go wrong, even as simple as not controlling the temperature correctly within the jacket, not having that temperature control ability affects the batch. So these fermenters, for example, you could be losing tens of thousands of liters worth of product in the process, or a material within the process, and still have component and asset damage and consequential damage because of asset failure and so on. So also very good use cases, although in my experience, all of the production assets are fit for predictive maintenance. I recently did an investigation for a company. I spent 2 days on site, and there wasn't a single machine that I thought we can't really monitor that, or there is no value in monitoring that. So I would say all of the assets.
And what's the, just on that actually? So the criteria of that, where you go, well, everything's fine or not. Like, how do you sort of come to that? I know it's probably lots multifaceted, I guess, but on that, or for that example, let's say.
Yeah. Well, when we were engaging with the customer, they wanted to monitor only a subset of assets. Then they increased the scope and decreased the scope, and eventually they decided to let us drive this engagement. So we went on site. We were able to engage with the maintenance teams, find out from them where their biggest problems were, where they were spending the most amount of time, where they were losing the most amount of batches due to asset failure. And what we identified in that environment is that there are 8 asset types which affect over 80% of the batches. So if we just focus our efforts on these very critical asset types, we could have a huge impact on their batch output ongoing. So that's exactly what we did. We went for the value. We had a look at the assets. We understood their operational complexity, their operational interdependency. We were able to evaluate what data they had available and how we were going to access that data, and then made specific sensor recommendations based off of the maintenance actions that we weren't covering from existing data. So always follow the value, but then look at factors like feasibility.
Yes, I guess it's interesting because the customer might have in their own minds, like, oh, it's definitely these ones. These are our most important critical assets that need to be monitored, right? So it's maybe not trying to fall into that trap.
Yes, absolutely. And I always have to pause for a moment when a customer, these are our really super critical assets. We want you to start with these. Because typically, critical assets on site are very over-maintained. So the chances of anything happening within a 12-month project is unlikely, because of a very good over-maintenance schedule that's happening. However, over-maintenance is by itself extremely costly. It cuts out time because you keep having to interrupt its production so that you can do these overly planned maintenance events. And within a predictive maintenance project, it's very hard to show value on those. So whenever we are creating our initial deployment list, we will, of course, take your supercritical assets, but we also want the bad actors, the ones that are giving you the most amount of hassle, the ones that are keeping your maintenance team up at night. Those are the ones that we want, because we want to show a real difference, not just a technology that is nice to look at, but not showing any results and not giving you a return, more importantly.
Exactly. Absolutely. And it's funny you mention assets again, because we diverted slightly from our original plan. We do have an asset that we're going to sort of talk through in a lot more detail, which should hopefully be on the screen in a second.
There we go.
There it is. So why don't you talk us through this?
So in this example, this is a success case based off of silicone valves for a vial filling machine. So these silicone valves are a part of the filling mechanism, which give out precise amounts of into a vial, going through very much like a bottle filling line, if you've ever seen one of those. Now, the data that we're monitoring for this was closed position in the form of microns. So the application was tracking, or it automatically built an understanding of normal position and started to track the change on, well, in this case, one of them, but we have had successes on these silicone valves as an example. So we started to track an increase in the closed position, but it's microns. Very, very, very hard to detect in any other way than looking at the data, for example. So the application raised a case, our form of notification, and with enough time for the maintenance teams to plan in this maintenance activity when they already had a planned stop. So they were ready to stop the line at a certain point, and we gave them a notification with enough advance notice that they could just add this into that planned stop. Because it didn't fail during production, and because it was planned in when it best suited the maintenance teams, the production output, when they had the right spares and the right people in place, this one very boring notification essentially was able to save 168,000 units. And when you look at that in the form of numbers sold, that is a huge amount for something very small. But at the same time, we like boring, because the boring things have saved you very, very big negative futures.
And actually, because we haven't used that phrase yet, but it was one I was going to mention earlier, but forgot. But decision support, and that what you just described there, epitomizes that really, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And the really nice thing about our solution is, yes, it's about giving insight into change within relevant data sets. But application is also designed to present the user with possible explanations, especially now that we have our Copilot. It's almost like having a reliability engineer at hand 24/7, someone who can interpret the data for you and present the users with recommended actions, and a reliability engineer that you can have a conversation with.
And why not? So skip ahead a little bit, actually, because you sort of led quite nicely into it. Fantastic. Fans all out the window, you see. But we're going to have a look at the app, because actually, well, first of all, as you can see, we've got a lovely demo account of different areas. We're going to cover obviously pharmaceutical today, but we're going to go through some examples of what you can see in the app and some of the insights that customers can essentially get. So, yeah.
So yes, this is the Senseye predictive maintenance application. Within this environment, we have a range of industrial sectors, but really this is meant to represent multiple factory locations around the world. So for today, we'll go into the pharmaceutical industry, where we have 4 different factories. We could then go down from the factory level to an area level to a machine level to an asset level, as I've described. But we want to focus on a case today. So this case is the water recirculation pump. It will be within the water cooling system from the cooling towers. Now, the Senseye Copilot is presenting the user with the case information that they need to know. So our users, or the users of the application, don't need to have experience with data analytics. They don't need to know how to interpret graphs or charts. It is the application, or Senseye Copilot, is presenting them with what they need to know. So at the top, what is happening? This is describing the behavior in the data. So we can see there's a degradation and rising trend on the motor current measures. And we can see that evidence directly underneath. So that chart shows motor current, and anything that has a blue highlight, whether it's on the measure or throughout the box, is showing you a trend detection. So it's highlighting that as a trend detection. We can also see that, as I say, about the 19th of October, there is a sharp drop, a step change back to normal, with a grayed out spanner symbol at that point, showing that work was conducted at that point. It was a work event at that point, bringing it back down to normal. But we'll see what that is in a moment. However, the Copilot's telling you what's happening in the data, it's presenting evidence, and then it's giving possible explanations. So there's 3 here: blocked outlet filter, blocked valves on the output, and debris in the infeed causing cavitation. So this is the application interpreting the behavior of the data and presenting the user with possible explanations. But if we look at the top explanation, the degradation and rising trend in motor current could be due to a blocked outlet filter. This has been a common issue in similar cases, and resolving it has prevented potential breakdowns. And then you can see a link to a previous case which was opened on the 19th of August. So this is now 3 months ago. What is happening? Degradations, rising trends, motor current. So so far it looks identical to what we're experiencing now. The possible explanations are slightly different, but also in line with what I was seeing then. But if we go down to the case feedback, so this is the user giving feedback to the application about the case that happened 3 months ago. So at the top, rate your satisfaction. The user indicated that this was excellent, very helpful, using the smiley faces. Then help the app understand the behavior that caused the case to be generated. So the user indicated that they avoided a potential breakdown. Then what was known at the time, was it reasonable to open this case? Yes. And the written feedback was change the outlet filter. So this is from the user. They had, in the case, they had investigated it. The Copilot presented them with possible explanations. I'm assuming the user went and did a physical inspection, confirmed that this information was correct, performed maintenance, and then gave us a little bit of feedback here, confirming. So fantastic. The way that I see this functionality is it's like having a reliability engineer who's only ever worked on this one asset from the moment it was onboarded. And it can present to the user any bit of relevant information from the past as it has to do with this current case at the moment. But like with any good reliability engineer, we can then talk to it. We're going to now talk to our Copilot. So on the bottom right-hand side, we're going to click on the Copilot icon, and we're going to ask it a question. So I'm new here. How do I start investigating this? I'll let it finish loading before I do that up. So to start investigating this case, you can follow these steps. Review the open message examine the evidence charts, read the prescriptive message, check related cases, and it's giving you 3 links to go and have a look at from March, May, and August this year. Recent work events. It says here, for example, there was a work event on October the 19th where the filter was cleaned due to clogging, and a link to that. Formulate a plan based on the information gathered, and potentially go and inspect or examine the in-feed and out-feeds of this asset. Fantastic. Question. So what manual checks should I do? Inspect the outlet filter, check the output valve, examine the in-feed for debris, listen to unusual noises, check recent maintenance records. So actually quite a good list of things, especially for someone who isn't familiar with the practices of this asset or this machine or this area or the organization. And one of the really good things about our Copilot is that it works in any language. So lastly, we're going to have this translated into Spanish. And I'm assuming that is spot on. Correct.
Please let us know.
My Spanish colleagues have confirmed that the translation is really good.
Fantastic.
So, and this functionality, the reason that we've translated this now is really to show that for global organizations where you've got facilities all over the world with different native languages, that maintenance teams can now collaborate together. There is no silos or maintenance practice silos. It's unifying maintenance practices through conversation, through feedback, through integrated work events, and making this information accessible throughout the entire organization, not just transferred from one person to another, as it was in the old days. And we even have the ability to add in expert knowledge. So within our application, we have the knowledge tab. This allows users to upload expert knowledge in the form of user manuals, maintenance manuals, spare parts lists, schematics, images, videos, a full range of documents you can upload. But for the text files, the Copilot is then using that information to present back to the user. Quite often, if you think about user manuals, they are in a cupboard somewhere in the admin building and no one's seen it, and it only gets referenced if it really, really has to. Whereas if that is inside here, inside of our Copilot, all of that information is easily referenced. If it was a spare parts list, if the maintainer needs to know what the part number was for the drive end bearing, instead of having to go to a different system or to maybe even go to the spares department or the stock department and find out what the code is, they could just reference that from the application itself.
So yeah, just really, really great explanation and walkthrough. I mean, it's like you do it for a living. But what the thing that stands out to me is actually it's raising knowledge up. Knowledge that you think it could either be dusty in a cupboard somewhere, or it could be locked in a system in a shared file service. But in Sunsight, it's about raising that to the surface and it being useful again, dusting it off. And
absolutely. So expert knowledge combined with this inherent knowledge of condition monitoring, reliability, maintenance practices, and the specifics of your machine, your data, its history, your maintenance team's feedback make it an extremely powerful tool. And it is bringing up that knowledge instantly.
Excellent. So the time is upon us. We've got 6 minutes left to answer the audience questions we've flown through. So thank you everyone who's added questions so far. So I guess just to kick us off. So can you explain how the Copilot feature works in detail and what makes it unique? I mean, you're not part of the product team, but maybe a bit more, from your perspective.
Essentially, you could language models. I'm pretty sure everyone understands that. But essentially, it's like having ChatGPT. But the language models we have in our environments, we're continuing to feed with specifics around condition monitoring practices, reliability, maintenance, as I said earlier. We're also, for each of our customers that decide to put in their knowledge documents, it is learning specifically from those and being extremely useful, as I've described earlier, but for their environment. So what is unique about ours? It's best in class in the world, but we're continuing to make it better as it relates to predictive maintenance. So ours is going to be the best reliability engineer you've ever seen.
Best virtual one, I think. So about scalability, can you elaborate on the scalability of Senseye for large versus small pharmaceutical facilities? So how do we scale? Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. So when we start to engage with customers, we'll start on an initial deployment. Really what this is about is making sure that we understand the environment, we get over the hurdles around integration and training the project team, even if that initial deployment is just a milestone in a much bigger scaled project already. But once we have the integration together and the project teams are knowledgeable on the process, it is very, very easy to scale this up. So once the integration is sorted, I've seen our delivery team do it. They can onboard hundreds of assets in a matter of a day or two once you've got the complexity out of the way. So cloud-based, attaching assets, onboarding assets, grouping these assets with others, tens, hundreds, thousands of other assets of its type is very easy. And this is all done through our to-use user interface.
Fantastic. Maybe we've got 3 minutes left. So we can twist it. So in terms of integration, so how do you handle integration challenges with legacy equipment? Very specifically, legacy.
Yes. Not everything can be integrated easily. However, us being Siemens have a range of systems, portfolio items that have got northbound and southbound connectors, which means that we can gather data from a range of OEM-specific machines with native connectors to push data through to Senseye. So actually, we're perfectly suited to handle that kind of problem.
And just bring one more question. So, in terms of, I mean, this is to do with integration as well, but it's more like how does Senseye integrate with existing workflows as well? So, within, do you rip out existing workflows and put Senseye in, or can it sort of, fit within those already?
I think that is one of the steps in our structured methodology that we run for everyone. It's workflow management. So essentially, the application provides information. And we want that information to be presented wherever it suits the customer, wherever it suits the user. So we can work with IT, OT teams to identify what the communications are, which system initiates the communications for cybersecurity reasons and what have you. But everything that you see within the application can essentially be put into any other system, whether that's the attention index coloring, whether that's the messaging, the prescriptive messaging you see here. For maintenance teams specifically, CMMS integration is absolutely a big benefit that we can provide for them, so that when a case is raised, that gets raised in their native CMMS, and when they close off work event information, that comes back automatically.
Exactly. So it's all about fitting in with existing workflows and reusing existing investments is what we're saying.
Absolutely.
So that brings us almost to time. So we're on time, which is a really good start. If there's any questions we haven't answered, we'll certainly look at those and we'll work out a way to follow up afterwards, whether with more content or via email or that kind of thing. But I think for today, thank you, Jonathan, for joining us and sharing your expertise. And thank you, everyone at home, for joining us, home or wherever you are in the world, for joining us. And we'll see you at the next live event, hopefully. Thank you for joining.
Thank you for watching. To learn more about this topic, check out the links in the description. And if you enjoyed what you saw, like the video and subscribe to the channel.